Alright everybody, hello, and let's look at another game, game 8, in the Lasker Capablanca match from 1921. Lasker on the white side goes d4, he's been varying his opening move a little more. We get d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, c4, and Queen's Gambit, no. We get this straight up Slav Defense, which some people, well, many consider to be a variant of, or a variation of Queen's Gambit anyways. I kind of considered it to be its own opening. Of course, it's similar in a way that it could transpose. You could get e6 and we're in the semi-Slav, or you could get the c6 in the Queen's Gambit, always that transpositions, we could get the similar or same positions from either way. But of course, you usually want to defend the pawn with a pawn if you're not taking. This also is of course playable way, but you want to defend the pawn with a pawn. So if capture happens, you have a central pawn. And life is just so much easier when you have one. Like you, well, of course there's exceptions, like for instance the Grunfeld defense, where we take with the knight, allow white to get a big center, and then we put pressure on the center. It's a different way of playing chess, but and also equally legit. But there is of course some ways that you, for instance, the Marshall defense is definitely a dubious of sorts of openings where we get the knight to the center and, well, we get kicked. Maybe not instantly, knight f3 might be a better way to do it, but basically you don't get such a good, well, the knight has to go to somewhere. If it goes there, it's on the way of getting kicked more. Or it goes there, it's a little bit sidelined. And you have a harder time, like the pawn is all the way here and getting a lot of play against the center here. Anyways, rambling. We get the Slav defense e3, the quiet variation. Box the bishop in. Sometimes it goes out here and we get something like knight there, and some stuff like that. But often the plan is to play e4 anyways, but with a more controlled fashion. Well, obviously we have a hard time getting it straight up in anyways, but and then again, well, if we get the e4 in and then the bishop out this way, we might get a little advantage in the center if we force black to take here. Lasker had, as far as I know, hasn't faced this too many games. He had, for instance, a match or a game in his match against Schlechter, where he faced the g6 here, an actual Schlechter Slav against Schlechter. Fancy. Here, Kappa had been, I think, few games where he had played either e6 turning into a semi-Slav, or in previous games he had also played the bishop f5, which we see here. Other bishop move, of course, is g4, where we pin the knight in hopes that, well, we want to build the center here, and black often is not too much against the trade on here either. Here we are playing a little bit against the e4 push. We have a really good grip on it. Well, knight c3, e6. But the downside, of course, bringing out the bishop outside the pawn chain is that sometimes the b7 can be vulnerable. Here I don't think it is too much, because the pawn is already on e3. So this bishop is not coming to harass stuff around here. So we can well, the best way to go harass the b-pawn is to go with the queen, and here black can deal with it easily with the queen c7. No bishops here or coming there, or even queen b6 might be better in a little bit of a standoffish way that neither side is not super interested about taking the queens and opening the opponent's rooks to put pressure on their a-pawns. And if white plays there and tries to make black take here, black can even more safely go to c7, because if you straight up go to c7, then sometimes you have well, you have to be aware of these possibilities on the c file not being closed, of like triple takes on the, well, after rook comes to c1, like triple takes on d5, and you might drop your queen on c7 in the end of the line. But if white plays c5 here, then the queen is even safer here, because no bishops here, and this file is not gonna happen. Well, it's very unlikely to happen. Of course, this is in a way that we give a white a tempo here, that sometimes the queen side expansion is definitely a plan, and not undangerous plan. On the other hand, black has a play on the center here, the c5. Especially if the pawn goes forward and white tries to actually expand this side, could put pressure on everybody here. Anyways, more ramblings. In a game, another way, well, this is a vulnerability. Of course, this is not safe yet, so this is definitely a way to, white can always go here and try to hunt the bishop in these lines. Either black goes straight up here, play on h file, solid, or black can also induce the f3 weakness here before he retreats here, and white doesn't have to take instantly. The bishop is not escaping anywhere, but eventually it will happen. And then, well, I don't know, we can decide a little bit. Question mark. It's played a lot nowadays, so it's a legit way to play for both sides. In this game, we get bishop d3, trading of the defender of e4. Technically, we are trading a good bishop, the bishop on the opposite color of our pawn chain to our opponent's so-called bad bishop, which is the color of their pawn chain. But of course, the bishop is not that too bad on this diagonal, and it was doing a job, and we eliminated defender, and the plan is to push e4. Black plays knight b d7, we get castles and bishop d6. Well, plan is also to play e5 probably, but white gets there first. Black still has the king in the center. Now this bishop is opened up, which we did put in there. Now we opened it up. It could be coming here, be a decent piece. Black takes. Of course, white is threatening this, so if we allow it, then the bishop here was a stupid move. You'd have to go here, and well, it's definitely not the thing you want to allow, especially here. Sometimes you let this happen, but it doesn't make sense with the bishop d6. You would have probably have to have played bishop e7 and then get castled, and this is, I think, maybe doable, maybe not in this exact position, but like sometimes it can work out. But it, like, well, it's definitely not so much fun. So most of the time people just take, and white takes of course back, or sorry, bishop d6 e4 takes, got sidetracked into the variation there, and then bishop is hanging again, we take, and then castles. This is of course often tempting, kick the queen off the central square. But, well, first you expose yourself to a pins here, but you might want the knight being here, because it does support them, the e5 break in a better ways. At least you make it easier than the knight here. It's not easy to get even here in the, let's say, castles, like since white has a good grip so far here. Anyhow, we get castles, we get bishop d2 coming here. Looks decent there. Get queen f6. I assume if the bishop would have gone here, we would have seen the queen g7 lining up here anyways. This is what happened in the game. White did not play bishop here. Instead they brought the rook out here. And queen went and offered the trade anyhow. White could try to say no. The downside of going all the way to e2 is that you might get lined up here and you can have a little harder time moving to a defense here, but let's say you go here and there. You're probably fine here. So probably black should not go inside there. No, it could have been a way to go about it. Black still probably is not pushing this, so I don't know if they want to build up on the e5 here. Of course, white can play bishop c3 like he is planning to, and try to make it harder. And well, black is solid. White has more space. Hoop-de-doo-doo. In a game we get trades, and bishop c3. Rook goes to the center. Rook goes to the center. Bishop gets out of the way. Maybe we are going here and looking on here. King comes to the center. And then knight f8. A little mysterious move, because the knight does not seem very active here. But I think the point is that we want to defend this one. So we can play f6 without dropping it and get the king into the play. And well, white decides that this was the wrong side. Black plays f6. And then we push on the king side. King comes to f7, freeing the knight from the defense. White is putting the pawns on the square complex of the bishop, but also their own bishop. It is restricting it in a way. Doesn't seem too much for either side. Black goes poking at the holes here. White defends it. Knight is poking around again. Maybe we're running the f5 here, where it would be decently placed. Rook e2, knight e7, rook c3, and a6. If the knight goes there, then I think we can just push here, and if takes. This is decent enough, and well, I mean, black could someday try to go there, but of course white can always go king g2, and it's not too much. Instead we get a6, very non-committal move. a4, rook b8, again a little mysterious move in a way, but white is planning of playing b4 and going b5, and black's plan to meet that was b5. All right, so this of course is kind of interesting move, because it does give, well, obviously we cannot take with the c pawn because the bishop is hanging, so we have to take with the a pawn, and this plan gives white a nice passed pawn on a file. Black has a backwards pawn on c6, So it looks pretty dodgy. But on the other hand, white also has their own problems. They have an isolated pawn on d4. They have to keep an eye on. And the b4 also is backwards. And black is getting a really juicy square in many cases here. Well, at the moment the knight is doing time covering the c6 backwards pawn, but it can also appear as d5 if needed. So definitely an interesting way to go about it. We got bishop d6 hitting the backwards pawn instantly. Rook went to defend. Of course not ideal, because you want the rooks to be on the pile somewhere. Not on the defense. Knight comes to d5, a really good square. Bishop drops to d2, covering these squares. And then we get rook bc8. And here we were agreed a draw. Well, backwards, fast, backwards, isolated, kind of backwards. Both sides have a lot of weaknesses, but they decided that it's equals out all. Like it's hard to put enough pressure in any of these weaknesses without dropping your own weaknesses. Like white has hard time lining up anywhere without dropping the b pawn, for instance. And if he does them, knight e1, knight c5, plunking the knight here, I think black is gonna take it, and with this kind of a knight, you cannot be worse, for sure. Anyways, another solid performance both sides. I don't think there was much of an advantage either way entire game. Well, anyways, happens. Sorry for if you watch this, but in the name of completeness, we need to look at them all. Thanks for watching, and until next time, ciao.